أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير آمين يا رب العالمين.
In this lecture, we will study possessive phrase or murakkab-e-izafi. Let us quickly revise what we have studied in the previous lectures. We started with the study of murakkab or phrase in Arabic grammar. We studied murakkab-e-tam, which is a phrase or murakkab that delivers a complete meaning. In grammar, it is also called jumla or sentence. Within murakkab-e-tam, we studied jumla ismiya. In contrast to murakkab-e-tam, we have murakkab-e-nakis. Murakkab-e-nakis is a phrase which does not deliver a complete meaning. It is not a sentence. We started with the study of 4 types of murakkab-e-nakis. The first murakkab-e-nakis that we studied was demonstrative phrase or murakkab-e-ishari. The second type of murakkab-e-nakis that we studied was descriptive phrase or murakkab-e-tawsifi. In the current lecture, we will study the third type of murakkab-e-nakis, that is called the possessive phrase or murakkab-e-izafi. Let us start with the study of murakkab-e-izafi or possessive phrase. Here we have a murakkab, kitab Allahi. Kitab Allahi is a murakkab because it is made of mufrad plus mufrad. If kitab Allahi is a murakkab, it will either be a murakkab-e-tam or it will be a murakkab-e-nakis. The only murakkab-e-tam that we have studied is jumla ismiya. Let us see if kitab Allahi is a murakkab-e-tam or jumla ismiya. Kitab Allahi is not a murakkab-e-tam. It is not a jumla ismiya. Why? Because neither ism in kitab Allahi meets criteria for it to be mubtada or khabar. We studied that jumla ismiya is comprised of at least 2 asma and it includes mubtada and khabar. The first rule that we studied in jumla ismiya was that both mubtada and khabar need to be marfu, or both mubtada and khabar need to be in the rafa status. Ism kitaba is not in the rafa status. Ism Allahi is not in the rafa status. Mubtada will be definite incapacity, khabar will be indefinite incapacity, and that is also not the case here. Kitaba is indefinite incapacity and ism Allahi is definite incapacity. So clearly we can see that murakkab kitab Allahi is not a murakkab-e-tam. This means that kitab Allahi must be a murakkab-e-nakis. Now we have to identify which type of murakkab-e-nakis is kitab Allahi. Is it a demonstrative phrase or murakkab-e-ishari? Kitab Allahi is not a murakkab-e-ishari because in a murakkab-e-ishari, the first ism will be ism ishara, and that is not the case here. So if kitab Allahi is not a murakkab-e-ishari, is it a descriptive phrase? Is it a murakkab-e-tawsifi? It is not. Why? We studied that in murakkab-e-tawsifi or descriptive phrase, we will have the combination of sifat and mausuf. Mausuf will come first and it will be followed by the sifat. Ism Allahi is not a sifat. Furthermore, we studied that both the sifat and the mausuf need to be equal in gender, number, capacity and status. Already we can see that ism kitaba and ism Allahi are at least not equal in capacity, neither are they equal in status. So, this is not a descriptive phrase or murakkab-e-tawsifi. The translation of kitab Allahi will be the book of Allah or Allah's book. Here we can see that there is some sort of a relationship or some sort of a link that is being established between one ism and another. In this murakkab, a relationship is being established between one ism, that is book, and another ism, that is ism Allah. Such a murakkab naqis is called murakkab izafi or possessive phrase. Let us study this murakkab in more detail. We will try to define murakkab izafi or the possessive phrase. We studied previously that in the murakkab kitab Allahi, there is a relationship between ism kitaba and ism Allahi. The translation of kitab Allahi is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kitaba is an ism and Allahi is an ism. And the relationship that is being formed here is that the book belongs to Allah, or Allah is in possession of the book. The possessive phrase or murakkab izafi involves joining one ism to another ism to form a relationship of possession or belonging. In the case of kitab Allahi, ism kitaba is being related to ism Allahi in the sense that the book belongs to Allah. The possessive phrase or murakkab izafi is used to convey a relationship of possession or belonging between one ism and another ism. The possessive phrase links one ism to another ism to establish a relationship of possession or belonging. Next, we will look at the different parts of the possessive phrase. Murakkab izafi or the possessive phrase is comprised of two parts. In the case of kitab Allahi, the first part is called mudaf. It is written as mudafun, but we can pronounce it mudaf. So what is mudaf? In a murakkab izafi, mudaf is the ism that is being possessed or the ism that is being owned. In the case of kitab Allahi, kitab is owned by Allah. Kitab belongs to Allah. Another definition of mudaf can be, it is the ism that is being related to another ism, or it is the ism that belongs to another ism. So, murakkab izafi or possessive phrase will have two parts. The first part is called mudaf, and the second part is called mudaf ilay. Mudaf ilay is the possessor, or it is the owner. In case of kitab Allahi, ism kitaba is the mudaf and ism Allahi is mudaf ilay. Ism Allahi is the possessor of the book. Ism Allahi is the owner of the book. And with the combination of mudaf and mudaf ilay, we are establishing a relationship between one ism and another ism. In the case of kitab Allahi, that relationship is the relationship of owning or belonging. There are rules that apply to mudaf and there are rules that apply to mudaf ilay. Let us look at the rules for mudaf. There are two basic rules for mudaf. Number one, mudaf will not accept al. We will not see al on mudaf. Second, mudaf will not accept tanween. We will not see double pesh, double zabar, double zair on mudaf. Also, mudaf will not accept noon at the end of dual asma and masculine non-broken plural asma. We previously studied that from the standpoint of status, asma can be divided into singular ism, dual asma, masculine non-broken plural asma, feminine non-broken plural asma, and broken plural asma. Asma that will have tanween on them are singular asma, feminine non-broken plural asma, and broken plural asma. These will be identified by the presence of double pesh, double zabar, double zair at the end of the ism. In the case of feminine non-broken plural, we will have the atun or atin ending sounds. Asma that will have noon at their end are the ones that will be either dual asma, which are identified by the ani or aini ending sounds, or masculine non-broken plural asma that are identified by una or ina ending sounds. So asma that have ani aini or una ina ending sounds will not accept noon at their end if they are to be mudaf. Mudaf ilay involves only one rule. Mudaf ilay will always be majroor. It will always be in the jar status or in the third form of ism. So mudaf ilay cannot be in the rafa status, it cannot be in the nasab status, it will always be in the jar status or majroor. In the Arabic text, mudaf is written and read first and is followed by mudaf ilay. We determined that this murakkab, Kitab Allahi, is an example of a possessive phrase or murakkab izafi. In the case of Kitab Allahi, ism kitaba is mudaf. Ism kitaba meets criteria for it to be mudaf because we do not see any presence of al on kitaba, and secondly, we do not see presence of tanween. There is no al-kitaba here, and there is no double zabar, double zair or double pesh on ism kitaba. So it does meet criteria for it to be mudaf. Ism Allahi follows the mudaf and it meets criteria to be mudaf ilay. We determined that there is only one criteria for mudaf ilay or one requirement for mudaf ilay, that it has to be majroor. It has to be in the jar status. And that is the case here. Taken together, this murakkab, Kitab Allahi, can be translated to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kitaba is the mudaf. It is possessed or owned. It is possessed or owned by mudaf ilay. Or ism kitaba belongs to mudaf ilay. Mudaf ilay is the possessor or owner of the mudaf. Please note that there is no word for of in Arabic language. The combination of mudaf and mudaf ilay will create this of, and it will link the mudaf to mudaf ilay and form the relationship. Let us do some revision of possessive phrase and try to answer these questions. How many parts does a possessive phrase or murakkab izafi have? 2. A murakkab izafi will have two parts, mudaf and mudaf ilay. What is written first in Arabic, mudaf or mudaf ilay? Mudaf is written first and it is followed by mudaf ilay. How many rules apply to mudaf? 2. What is the first rule for mudaf? Mudaf will not accept al. What is the second rule for mudaf? Mudaf will not accept tanween and mudaf will not accept noon at the end of dual asma that end in ani, aini, and masculine non-broken plural asma that end in una, ina sounds. What is the requirement for mudaf ilay? Mudaf ilay will always be majroor. It will always be in the jar status. Can mudaf ilay be marfu? Can it be in rafa status? No. Mudaf ilay must always be majroor. Can mudaf ilay be mansoob or in nasab status? No, mudaf ilay must always be majroor. Can mudaf ilay accept al? Yes, there is no restriction on mudaf ilay regarding al. Can mudaf ilay accept tanween? Yes, mudaf ilay can accept tanween. Will mudaf ilay accept noon at the end of dual asma and masculine non-broken plural asma? Yes, these are all restrictions that apply to mudaf and not to mudaf ilay. Can mudaf be marfu? That is, can it be in rafa status? Yes, mudaf has no restriction regarding status. Can mudaf be mansoob or in nasab status? Yes, mudaf has no restriction regarding the status. Can mudaf be majroor or in jar status? Yes, there is no restriction on mudaf regarding status. In the following examples, we have Kitabullahi, Kitaballahi, Kitabillahi. Kitabullahi means the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kitaballahi means the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Kitabillahi means the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kitabullahi, Kitaballahi, Kitabillahi all have the same meaning. Kitabullahi is a murakkab izafi, Kitaballahi is a murakkab izafi, and Kitabillahi is a murakkab izafi as well. In the case of Kitabullahi, Kitabu is mudaf, it is marfu or in the rafa status. In the case of Kitaballahi, Kitaba is the mudaf, it is mansoob or in the nasab status. And in the case of Kitabillahi, Kitabi is mudaf, it is majroor or in the jar status. When we look at mudaf ilay, we see Allahi, Allahi, Allahi. Mudaf ilay will always be majroor. It will always be in the jar status. In Kitabullahi, mudaf ilay is in the jar status. In Kitaballahi, mudaf ilay is majroor or in the jar status. And in Kitabillahi, mudaf ilay is majroor or in the jar status. So we see that the status of mudaf ilay will always be majroor or it will always be in the jar status. However, the status of mudaf can change from rafa to nasab to jar. Since mudaf can be marfu, mansoob or majroor, murakkab izafi can also be marfu, mansoob or majroor. Kitabullahi is a possessive phrase or murakkab izafi that is rafa in status. Kitaballahi is a murakkab izafi that is nasab in status. And Kitabillahi is a murakkab izafi that is jar in status. Kitabullahi is marfu, Kitaballahi is mansoob, Kitabillahi is majroor. We will study examples of murakkab izafi or the possessive phrase. Baitullahi. If this murakkab, Baitullahi, is a murakkab izafi, Baitu would be mudaf and Allahi would be mudaf ilay. Let us see if Baitu meets criteria for it to be mudaf. Baitu does not have al on it and Baitu does not have tanween on it. So ism Baitu meets the criteria for it to be mudaf. Looking at Allahi, we see that Allahi ism is majroor. It is in the jar status. So Baitu meets criteria for it to be mudaf. Ism Allahi meets criteria for it to be mudaf ilay. And Baitullahi is a murakkab izafi or a possessive phrase. Baitullahi means the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdullahi, on the same pattern as Baitullahi, means the servant of Allah. Ibadullahi, the servants of Allah. If we look at Baitullahi, Abdullahi, Ibadullahi, we see that in each case a relationship is being established between mudaf and mudaf ilayh, and that is manifested by of in the English translation. The house of Allah, the servant of Allah, the servants of Allah. Azabullahi, the punishment of Allah. Ni'matullahi, the blessing of Allah. Kalamullahi, the word of Allah. Masajidullahi, the mosques of Allah. Nasrullahi, the help of Allah. Rahmatullahi, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khashyatillahi, the fear of Allah. If we look at ism khashyati, we see that it is majroor or it is in the jar status. So mudaf here is in the jar status. In all of these examples, mudaf was in the rafa status or the mudaf was marfu. Baitu, abdu, ibadu, azabu, these are all examples of mudaf in the rafa status or mudaf being marfu. In this case, in khashyatillahi, the mudaf is in jar status. Baitu Zaidin, the house of Zaid or Zaid's house. Here we see that Zaidin is mudaf ilayh and it can accept tanween. So on mudaf ilayh, as we previously studied, there is no restriction as far as tanween is concerned. It just needs to be in jar status. Zaidin is in jar status, so it meets the criteria for it to be mudaf ilayh. Baitu Ismaila, the house of Ismail or Ismail's house. Baitu Ismaila is a murakkab izafi that would make Ismaila mudaf ilayh. Ismaila is mudaf ilayh, that is the owner of the house or Baitu. But we see that Ismaila has a zabar on it. Unlike all the previous examples where we have Allahi, 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 Zaidin, Allahi, in the case of Ismaila, we have a zabar. We are not saying Ismaili. The reason for this is that the name Ismail is ghair munsarif. We previously studied that a ghair munsarif ism will not accept tanween and it will not accept zair in the jar status. Ismaila is in the jar status. It is majroor. Why? Because it is a mudaf ilayh and it cannot be marfu or mansoob. So the status of Ismaila in Baitu Ismaila is majroor. It is jar in status because it is a mudaf ilayh. To recall ghair munsarif asma, each ghair munsarif ism will have two requirements. Number one, it cannot accept tanween. Number two, it cannot accept zair in the jar status. Baitu Usamata, just like Baitu Ismaila, Baitu Usamata also has zabar at the end rather than us saying Baitu Usamati. Baitu Usamata means the house of Usama or Usama's house. We studied that masculine names that have a gol ta at the end, such as Usama, Talha, Huzaifa, they will also be ghair munsarif. Because Usama is a ghair munsarif ism, it will not accept zair in the jar status. So when the name Usama is used as mudaf ilayh in a murakkab izafi, we will say Baitu Usamata. Baitu Ibrahima, the house of Ibrahim or Ibrahim's house. The name Ibrahim is also a ghair munsarif ism. That is why we will say Baitu Ibrahima. Let us analyze the following statements. As-salatu imaduddini. and As-salatu mi'rajul mu'mini. The first statement can be translated to Salah is the pillar of deen, or Salah is the pillar of religion. And the second statement can be translated to Salah is the mi'raj of the believer. Let us focus on Imadud Dini, which can be translated to the pillar of deen or the pillar of religion. Imadud Dini is not a murakkab tam. It is not a jumla ismiya. Why? Because its components do not meet criteria for it to be a jumla ismiya. For instance, if we look at ad-dini, we can clearly see that it is not in the rafa status. And we have studied in jumla ismiya that both mubtada and khabar need to be marfu. Furthermore, imadu is not definite. Therefore, we can already tell that imadud dini is not a jumla ismiya. If it is not a murakkab tam, then what type of murakkab naqis is it? It is not a murakkab ishari or demonstrative phrase because imadud dini does not contain any demonstrative pronoun. It is also not a murakkab tawsifi or descriptive phrase because ad-dini is not a sifat. So if it is not a murakkab ishari or it is not a murakkab tawsifi, then can it be a murakkab izafi? Let us look at imadu. Imadu does meet criteria for it to be mudaf. We do not see presence of al on imadu, and also we do not see a tanween. So far, imadu is meeting criteria for it to be mudaf. Let us look at the next component, ad-dini, and see if that meets criteria for it to be mudaf ilayh. We can see that ad-dini is in jar status. It is majroor. Imadu meets criteria for it to be mudaf. Ad-dini meets criteria for it to be mudaf ilayh. And imadud-dini is a murakkab izafi or a possessive phrase. And it can be translated to the pillar of deen. Similarly, mi'rajul mu'mini, it is not a jumla ismiya because mi'rajul mu'mini does not meet criteria for it to be a jumla ismiya. It is not a murakkab ishari because we do not see a demonstrative pronoun. It is also not a murakkab tawsifi because in a murakkab tawsifi we would expect the mawsuf and the sifat to be equal in terms of status, number, gender and capacity, and that is not the case. Mi'rajul mu'mini is also a possessive phrase where mi'raju meets the criteria for it to be mudaf. There is no al, there is no tanween, and al-mu'mini is in the jar status. Al-mu'mini is majroor, so it meets criteria to be mudaf ilayh. Mi'rajul mu'mini will be translated as the mi'raj of the believer. Now we will study dual and plural asma as mudaf and mudaf ilayh. This is an example of a murakkab izafi or possessive phrase, Baitul Muslimi. Baitul Muslimi can be translated as the Muslim's house. Baitu, we do not see an al on it, we do not see tanween, so it meets criteria for mudaf. Al-Muslimi is majroor. It is in the jar status, so it meets the requirement for mudaf ilayh. Baitul Muslimi is therefore a murakkab izafi. The feminine version, the female Muslim's house or the feminine Muslim's house, will be Baitul Muslimati. Again, Baitu, there is no al, there is no tanween. It satisfies the requirement for mudaf, and al-Muslimati is majroor, or it is in the jar status, which will be the case for mudaf ilayh. What if we want to talk about the two Muslims' house or the two feminine Muslims' house? In the first case, we will have Baitul Muslimaini. The two Muslims are owning the house. The house belongs to the two Muslims. So, the two Muslims or al-Muslimaini will be mudaf ilayh and baytu will be mudaf. We are using al-Muslimaini here because we have to indicate jar status. For dual asma, ani ending sound indicates rafa status and aini ending sound will indicate nasab or jar status. Baytul Muslimaini, baytu meets criteria for mudaf. Al-Muslimaini meets criteria for mudaf ilayh because it is in the jar status. For the feminine example, we will say Baytul Muslimataini. Just like the masculine example, we have the aini ending sound here. In this case, the two Muslim women or girls or the two feminine Muslims are owning the house. The two feminine Muslims are mudaf ilayh and the house which is being possessed or which is being owned is mudaf. Now coming to the plural example, if we want to say the house of the Muslims or the house of the feminine Muslims, in the first case we will say Baytul Muslimina. Again, focus on the ina ending sound. Ina ending sound is used to indicate nasab or jar status. So, una ending sound will indicate rafa status. Ina ending sound will be used for nasab or jar status. Baytul Muslimina, the Muslims who own the house or the house of the Muslims. Baytu meets criteria for mudaf. Al-Muslimina, because it is in the jar status, because it is majroor, meets criteria for mudaf ilayh. Baytul Muslimati. Here we have the ati ending sound. If we recall, ati ending sound will be used for nasab or jar status in feminine non-broken plural. Baytul Muslimati can be translated as the house of the feminine Muslims. If we pay attention here, in the case of mudaf ilayh, we do not need to eliminate the noon that comes at the end of dual asma or at the end of plural asma. That rule applies to mudaf, as we will see in the next examples. The Muslim of Makkah. Muslimu Makkata. In this case, we are saying Makkata and not Makkati because the names of cities are ghair munsarif. And a ghair munsarif ism will not accept zair in the jar status. What if I want to say the two Muslims of Makkah? One way to say that will be Muslimani Makkata. Muslimani means two Muslims and Makkata means Makkah. The two Muslims of Makkah. The Muslims belong to Makkah. Makkah will be mudaf ilayh and the two Muslims will be mudaf. But we studied that in the case of mudaf, it will not accept noon for dual and for masculine non-broken plural asma. So, writing it this way is incorrect. For it to be correctly read and written, we will remove the noon here and we will have Muslima Makkata. Once again, to revise the rule, the mudaf will not accept noon for dual asma and masculine non-broken plural asma. So in the case of Muslimani, which is a dual ism, we will remove the noon at the end and we will be left with Muslima. Please also note that in the case of mudaf ilayh, we have the restriction that we always need to have jar status. We do not have that restriction for mudaf. That is why we can use Muslima here, which will be in the rafa status rather than Muslimai, which will be in the jar status. Now if I want to say the Muslims of Makkah, we are using the example of masculine non-broken plural. If we say Muslimuna Makkata, that is incorrect. Why? Because Muslimuna is the mudaf and for it to be accurate, we cannot accept noon at the end of Muslimuna. So we will remove the noon at the end of the mudaf and we will say Muslimu Makkata, which is correct. Again, mudaf will not accept noon for dual asma and masculine non-broken plural asma. Here we will study examples of Murakkab Izafi in the Rafa status, Nasab status and Jar status. Muslimu Makkata, the Muslim of Makkah. Muslimu is indicating Rafa status. Muslimu is mudaf. Makkata is mudaf ilay. Makkata is in Jar status. It is majroor because it is mudaf ilay. Muslimu Makkata in the Nasab status will become Muslima Makkata. The meaning will stay the same, the Muslim of Makkah. Mudaf ilay Makkata will continue to be majroor. The status of the Murakkab Izafi will change with the status of the mudaf. In this case, since mudaf is marfu, the entire Murakkab Izafi will be marfu. In this case, the mudaf is mansoob, the entire Murakkab Izafi will be mansoob. Muslimu, Muslima, Muslimi, Makkata. In this case, mudaf is majroor, so the entire Murakkab Izafi will be majroor. The meaning will once again be the same, that is the Muslim of Makkah. Next we will look at the example of dual asma. Muslima Makkata, the two Muslims of Makkah. Mudaf will not accept noon at the end of dual asma and at the end of masculine non-broken plural asma. Muslima used to be Muslimani, but because we are using it as a mudaf, we will remove the noon at the end of Muslimani and it will become Muslima Makkata. Muslima is derived from Muslimani, which indicated Rafa status, so Muslima Makkata is marfu. In the Nasab status, we will have Muslimai Makkata, also meaning the two Muslims of Makkah. Muslimai is derived from Muslimaini, and we removed the noon at the end of Muslimaini for it to become mudaf, and now we have Muslimai Makkata. In the Jar status, we will also have Muslimai Makkata. Now looking at the masculine non-broken plural example, we have Muslimu Makkata, the Muslims of Makkah. Once again, mudaf will not accept noon at the end of dual asma and at the end of masculine non-broken plural asma. Muslimu used to be Muslimuna, which is a masculine non-broken plural. But because Muslimuna needed to be used as a mudaf, we removed the noon at the end of Muslimuna and it became Muslimu Makkata. Muslimu Makkata is marfu because the mudaf Muslimu is marfu because it is derived from Muslimuna, which indicates the Rafa status. In the Nasab form, we will have Muslimi Makkata. Muslimi is derived from Muslimina, and at the end of Muslimina, if we remove the noon, we will end up with Muslimi Makkata. Muslimu was Muslimuna, Muslimi was Muslimina. Muslimi Makkata also means the Muslims of Makkah. Finally, in the Jar status, we will also have Muslimi Makkata, meaning the Muslims of Makkah. We will look at the effect of al in mudaf ilay on the translation of Murakkab Izafi. We have the following example from Surah Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. If we focus on Rabbil Alameen, this is a possessive phrase. It is a Murakkab Izafi. Rabbi is mudaf because there is no al and there is no tanween. Al-alamina is mudaf ilay. It is majroor because of the ina ending sound. Al-alamina. Rabbil alamina will be translated as the Lord of the worlds. The presence of al on al-alamina brings out the worlds in the translation. Let us look at another example. Here we have abiru sabilin. Sabilin means path. Abiru means traveler. Abiru sabilin will be translated as a traveler of a path or a traveler of any path, meaning we are not referring to a specific path. Abiru is mudaf, there is no tanween, there is no al, and sabilin is mudaf ilay because it is jar in status and it follows mudaf. Taken together, abiru sabilin will be translated as a travel. Taken together, abiru sabilin will be translated as a traveler of a path or a traveler of any path. The absence of al on mudaf ilay does not bring out the in the translation. In contrast, if we look at abirus sabili, here al has been added to sabilin to make as-sabili. Abiru is mudaf, as-sabili is mudaf ilay because it follows the mudaf and it is jar in status, and it will be translated as the traveler of the path. So the addition of al on mudaf ilay creates the meaning of the in the translation. In another example, kitabu talibin can be translated as a book of a student or a student's book. If we add al to talibin, it will become a talibi, and kitabut talibi will be translated as the book of the student or the student's book. We will do some practice of murakkab izafi or the possessive phrase. The house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Baytullahi. The book of Allah. Kitabullahi. The servant of Allah. Abdullahi. The help of Allah. Nasrullahi. The establisher of Salah. Muqimus Salati. The day of Jummah. Yawmul Jum'ati. Knower of the unseen. Alimul Ghaibi. Mi'raj of the Mu'min. Mi'rajul Mu'mini. The Mu'min's prison. Sijnul Mu'mini. The disbeliever's paradise. Jannatul Kafiri. A path's traveler. Abiru Sabilin. In this case, in the English translation, we do not have the. That is why in Arabic, we do not have al on mudaf ilay. The boy's two books. Kitab al-waladi. In this case, for mudaf, we have kitaba rather than kitabani. Mudaf will not accept noon at its end in the case of dual asma and masculine non-broken plural asma. Zaid's two houses. Baita Zaidin. The house of Muslims. Baitul Muslimina. We are using the ina ending sound to indicate jar status for mudaf ilay. Lord of the worlds. Rabbul Alamina. The king of mankind. Malikun Nasi. The signs of Allah. Sha'airullahi. The messenger of Allah. Rasulullahi. The blessing of Allah. Ni'matullahi. The prayer of Fajr. Salatul Fajri. the pillar of religion. Imaduddini, love of the world. Hubbud dunya, the book of the two boys. Kitabul waladaini, the Muslims of Medina. Muslimul Madinata, the doors of the masjid. Abwabul masjidi, the windows of the room. Nawafizul ghurfati.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.